16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
No, we don't do that anymore. We have a very quick, concise opening. We just get right to it. We've changed our intro. They know nothing about me. I'm a stranger to them.
Wait, we're trying a new intro, and the intro this time is be a complete stranger.
You said our intro needed work, so I have updated it. I'm starting with bullet point 1.
Listener.
How does humor impact the process and results of education? Answer. This was your idea.
It's the very first bullet point on our
My
list this
intro literally says, hi, hello, knock, knock joke, because you've decided we say too much at the top of the show. So, hi, hello, listener. Welcome to 16 to 1, a podcast about teaching, education, and learning. I am Katie, that is Chelsea, and here is your required knock, knock joke. Are you ready, Chelsea?
I'm ready.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
A little old lady.
A little old lady who?
Hey, you can yodel.
Oh, wow.
You have the worst sense of humor.
That was
And
very...
you chose a whole podcast topic about humor.
Well, see, based on response to the last episode, it became clear that I needed a primer in humor of sorts.
You already have a primer in humor. It's me.
Yeah, it's
I
true.
am the humor.
But see, now I've done my own research, and now I understand how humor works.
You just had to read about it to
I
get
just
it.
had to read some books to understand human humor. It's fine. It's fine.
You're definitely not posing as a human from a foreign.
I'm definitely I could have auditioned for Third Rock with my, just with no acting
Third
experience
Rock?
whatsoever.
What are you talking about?
Third Rock from the Sun.
Oh.
That show where they actually are aliens pretending to be humans. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Third Rock from the Sun. It was one of my guilty pleasure TV shows growing up.
I am not surprised by that at all.
Yeah,
because you probably looked at them and there's a mirror.
The other,
you were like, "Wow, look at them assimilating. That's so impressive."
Yeah, the other character that I found a great deal of comfort in was the guy in Men in Black. The guy, he's like the big giant scary alien dude who like crunches into the human body, and he's like, you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. He's like actually a huge bug, but he zips on a human skin suit of a guy that he shows
So
up.
you're saying you turned on your... When do you do your laundry? When do you wash your human skin suit?
Part. It's not the wearing skin part that I'm talking about. It's just the idea of feeling so uncomfortable in one's own skin that you might as well be an alien visitor who has
wearing a different skin suit,
eviscerated a human and is now hiding inside of human skin. That's what I feel like sometimes.
Okay,
walking out amongst the public.
In the public, you work from home.
Yeah, there's a reason I try to minimize public contact.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well.
Welcome to 16 to 1.
This is
podcast.
You have been studying for this episode for days, and now I understand why. You decided that at your age, today's the day I'm going to learn humor. It only took you 30-some years.
Today's the day I open the encyclopedia to the humor page. Okay, here we go.
I'm going to be so much funnier now. I can't wait. Half the time when people are laughing at me, you're not laughing. And this tells me everything I need to know about why you weren't laughing. It's because you weren't mature enough in your humor to appreciate me.
Wow.
How's your human skin suit today? Does it zip up from your toes like a Snuggie, or
No, it's in the back.
like footies? Oh, you're wearing footies.
It's in the back. It's in the zipper's in the back.
The zipper's in the back.
Mm-hmm,
Oh.
Mm-hmm. It's got one of those. What are the butt flaps called?
Let's just leave it at that. let's not go any further into
What
that.
are those things called? Do you know the
Nope.
the pajamas?
No.
The pajamas that have the
I
flaps.
know. No.
What are they called?
I don't know. Butt flaps.
No. The pajamas. What are they called? They have a name. Those kinds of pajamas.
Pajamas.
No, with the butt flaps.
Pajamas with butt flaps.
Hey Google, what are the pajamas with the flaps
She's
in the butt?
talking to herself. Oh, if Google shows you... Flapjack pajamas.
Trapdoor pajamas.
Trapdoor.
There's another name for them. I can't find it though.
Trapdoor
It doesn't
is
matter.
not a
Anyway.
good word.
No.
That feels bad.
Trapdoor pajamas.
This is the only episode that has a warning for explicit content, and it's because Chelsea's talking about
Flapjack
pajamas.
trapdoor pajamas.
Flaptrap.
Talking about my skin suit. It's fine.
And how
Anyway.
apparently you... Never mind.
Yeah, let's get back to this episode. We've strayed.
Nope, this is it.
This is the second week of reinventing our intro, and we've strayed quite far.
I think I'm really glad that it's blown up in your face that we had to change the intro, because so far it's only getting worse.
I would like the record to
And
show.
your whole goal was to be better, and it's somehow run further from what you wanted.
I would like the record to show that I did not think that we necessarily had to change the intro. What I was worrying about...
Insert clip from last episode.
No.
here.
We get... Yeah, what I was saying is we get to a certain point of maturity in the pod, and you
Not
start
ourselves.
to just think, you know, I've been doing this a while now. I've got some expertise. How can I make this just a little bit better? And if I were thinking about our podcast, the intro segment, I'd be like, I love the pointless banter, much as I said last episode, but
Okay.
I'm not sure everyone else does. But we heard from a lot of people who listen regularly that they do enjoy at least some measure of pointless banter.
Did you get someone who said they don't love all of it?
No, we
Are
only
you
had
talking about
positive
our one
feedback.
bad review on Apple Podcasts?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, the one that you will never live down in your
My vocal
entire
fry.
lifetime.
Well,
We both have vocal fry. This is just the feature of.
only women have vocal fry. Explain that to me.
No, it's just that men have the capacity to uniquely be annoyed by women's vocal fry. I think that's,
What a gift. So, in an effort to make our intro better, you also decided that now you're going to understand humor.
Yeah.
This should have been like episode 2.
Oh. Well, it wasn't.
Oh.
What was episode 2?
You don't say.
Dress codes. That was the most humorless episode we've ever done, possibly.
Probably not.
Was it dress codes?
There was very little humor in Betsy DeVos. There's very little humor in Betsy DeVos.
Okay, fair.
Full stop.
Very little humor in ghouls. All right.
There's someone in a skin suit.
Anyway.
Is she one of you?
Nope. Not
Is she
one-
from your planet?
She's not from my planet.
But she's one of yours.
She's not from my planet.
Okay.
It's okay. If she wants to come on the pod and confirm that she is in fact human.
No.
Okay.
All
Anyway,
right. Well, everyone zip up those skin suits.
so yes, zip up your skin suits, strap in. We're going for a ride.
Cover
This
your
week-
flapjacks.
Cover your flapjacks. This week on the pod, we are talking about humor in education and how humor.
This is my TED Talk.
No, that was last week. Sorry.
I swear to God. Cassie, if you're listening.
See, this is the thing is that, like, I just stare at
This is
Kate.
a cry for help.
I say something that I know is gonna land like I don't know what's the thud, like
I think-
the dullest thud that you could imagine. Okay, I say something that I know is gonna land like
Like your
0%.
flap cake pajamas hitting the floor.
Yeah, flapcakes. My flapcakes. Okay, so I say something that's gonna land 0%, and I wait for Kate to look at me like I am the most moronic
So,
individual.
The problem is, though, is that a lot of jokes miss with you. So
A lot of jokes aren't jokes with me because I don't have a filter that rearranges
just
certain
because
thoughts
they don't
into
land
jokes.
with you doesn't mean it's not humor.
You're right, and we'll talk about different types of humor later on and why this might be.
All right. Take it away. That was a good transition.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Yeah.
You're working on those too.
Well, there are some interesting
Nice.
potential pitfalls for using humor in the classroom because different
You could have a
people-
student like Chelsea.
You could have one of me.
You could have. What was that? Oh, Robin Williams show where he was a alien. What was he called?
Mindy and Mark and Mindy.
That sounds right. Yeah.
I got there.
Mork and Mindy.
Mork and Mindy.
Mandy and
Hey, I got there.
Mork and Mindy.
Yes.
That's what I was thinking of. Okay. That's you. But oh man, I wish you were half as funny as Robin Williams. I wish I was half as funny as Robin Williams. All right.
Anyway,
One of my favorite things about starting a new school year, since it's finally happening,
yeah, it's
is
almost,
kind of
almost the S word's almost here. Unfortunately,
the S word is kind of weeding out the levels of humor in a classroom. You know what I mean? Because and I'll talk more about this later, but I'm so sarcastic that it's dangerous.
Ah.
And so the first couple times I'm sarcastic, I'm looking around the room to be like, who's reading me? You know, like
Who's
one of
got
those
the
types
dry
of things.
wit?
And it was one of those things that wearing a mask was kind of more fun for me at times because
like for COVID.
because I could play it a little longer to be like, am I being sarcastic or
You
am
can spend
I
a little more time figuring it out.
But it's always an important part of a back to school, right? Is figuring out where jokes land and where they don't land, and also who can read my sarcasm and who cannot.
Interesting.
And because your sarcasm meter and my sarcasm meter are very different. And so even like just in everyday relationships, you have to figure it out too. But being someone as sarcastic as I am can be a very dangerous thing because I get myself in a lot of pickles.
Sure.
Never meaning to, but because I'm certain that it's the funniest thing I've said in a while. And meanwhile, I'm just getting crickets.
I think both you and I, we definitely both have drier senses of humor, but we do definitely have different takes on that dryness, I would say.
Yeah, I think like if I was to summarize my humor, it would be probably a little bit of Blanche Devereaux and like B. Arthur.
Somebody watched
So, like,
a lot of Golden Girls.
Yeah, like Golden Girls meets like Lorelai Gilmore. The Gilmore Girls way of talking.
The rapid fire dialogue.
Yeah, that's very much like one of my best friends. And I like, that's how we speak to each other. So yeah, I'm very much more like quick for sure. So I don't have a lot of like build up. It's just like little zings.
I'm more
here
like
and there.
absent-minded professor kind of humor. I
Yeah,
think,
you
if
are
I had
for
to
sure.
describe myself.
You don't realize how funny you are sometimes. And I'm like losing it. And you have no idea what was funny. And I think that's very funny.
I like to not react as long as I possibly can when I realize
It
that
does make it
I'm
funnier.
causing somebody to laugh. I like to try to maintain a completely unmoved demeanor as long as possible
I like
because you
that.
can sometimes make people like just fall into a puddle of hysterical laughter the longer you wait.
That's me.
And if you just like stare at them.
That speaks to me.
So that
like,
also that
yeah.
is a feature of my especially with my close friends, not just random people on the street, but with my close friends. It's
You're definitely that way.
I would say that I tend to do that.
Yeah. And I don't really have that. When I start getting somebody to laugh, I can't hold it back. Like it's my favorite part. So then I lean into it even more, but I'm aware of it. You know what I mean? And like yours is so much more subtle that I think it just makes you hilarious.
Here's where the difference for us is that you tell a story, you get on a roll, and there are laughs all along the way. I listen to a conversation, let other people crack jokes, and then at like some extremely opportune minute, I will speak very quietly and inject some comment that I will hope that somebody in there finds
Will land,
funny.
yeah.
That's just the way that my brain... Because I don't really want to be like the main scene of attention either in social scenes.
I'm the one telling the stories
like,
for sure.
But I'm saying this like I'm conscious of doing it, but it's not really something I'm consciously doing in the moment.
There are also times that you're funny and you don't know that you're funny. And I think that's actually what makes somebody funny, is it's just like your natural response to things that are hilarious. Because there are definitely times when, and it's clear in a classroom too, where people are just trying to be funny. I don't find that funny. So I think that's, I mean, I obviously wouldn't want to do a podcast with you if I didn't think you were at least like moderately funny. But I do think sometimes you're not aware of how funny you are. On top of that, I think you're a bit of an airhead sometimes, and that makes you funny.
Sure.
Some things just miss with you, and I love watching your head try to work through it.
Again, being from outer space, you would imagine that there's some just very practical human things that I do not understand every once in a while. It's just like a glitch in the Matrix moment where I've suddenly ceased to connect with my fellow humans about some element of our shared reality, and I just blip out for a minute.
Okay.
That does happen.
So, taking it all the way back.
Yeah.
You have a note here to talk about classical Greece. Are we going from the aliens to classical Greece?
Oh, yeah. Let's just make all the conspiracy theorists really happy. Yeah. So, unlike the last few pods, I'm going back to our tradition of examining the long the long and storied history of the topic, which really only just involves me saying that the overlap of humor or comedy and then elements of both of those things and education that's been around for quite a while. So you know, we got Plato and Socrates. We got Socrates cracking jokes and making fun of people in what?
I thought you said Play-Doh.
Play-Doh. Plato.
Okay. So what are
Plato.
they doing? So they invented
The Greek
knock knock
philosopher
joke?
Plato. The one
Did
who
he tell
wrote
the first
about
knock knock joke?
Socrates. Yes, he told the first knock knock joke. It was about a triangle. Anyway, okay. So all the way back to Plato and Socrates.
I thought you had a joke.
I don't.
You don't.
Not at all.
It wasn't a very well-rounded.
You gotta stop being like, I thought you had a joke. I never
I know.
have a joke.
I know.
Unless I've like stopped and prepared it beforehand, I don't have a
You're
joke.
Right. You're right. I'll stop.
Thank you.
Okay, carry on.
I'm gonna like create an app that just like I can tap my wrist and serve myself a knock joke on my watch so that I'm never ill prepared for when you put me on the spot like this.
I have a whole website called the 101 Best Knock Knock Joke for Kids. Do you want me to tell
Anyway.
you one more? Okay, I'll stop. Knock knock.
No.
You say who's there?
Who's there?
2.
To who?
Actually, it's to whom. That's a you joke.
That's a very English teacher joke.
That's an alien joke. Okay. Well, when one doesn't laugh
If I
about
told-
something
if
that
I
one
to-
would find funny.
If I told you that joke, you would look at me like this.
Yeah, I would, but it's still a funny joke. Okay.
Okay, so anyway, yeah, it's been a minute since I took us all the way back to the ancients when diving into a topic, but I really only put this here just to mention that using humor as a tool for education has been around for quite a while, as you can imagine. So,
Sure.
you know, Plato, Aristotle, Aristophanes, the clouds, you know, ancient Greek playwrights and poets and things like this. We're very familiar with the idea of humor, and we're familiar with it in art and in philosophy and just in all kinds of disciplines, and we're familiar with it just in our daily lives as a way to connect to people and to build communities, reach out. If you're in education, it's a way to welcome students, particularly those who might be a little less comfortable in formal academic settings or for whatever reason. It's a tool, but it's also an enjoyable part of our lives together. So the research landscape around humor in education, because this topic is so broad that I was just like, I mean, I knew I wanted to talk about it and talk about it with you, but I didn't really know where to get started. But as it turns out, a lot of people are thinking and talking about this as a research topic already. So I'll share this in the show notes. I found this one article that's this research overview. It basically is a giant reference to all this other research about humor in education. But I found a couple of very interesting things in the research here. I found these 2 useful categories of humor, and this is a little bit along the lines of what you were just talking about. Researchers have split humor, and again, this is specifically in the classroom. A lot of this research was happening in the classroom. So they've split humor into these 2 categories, and they are affiliative and aggressive. Now, aggressive sounds bad and mean, but it just means a kind of humor that is somewhat antagonistic.
I can be that way.
Yeah. Even if it's not necessarily mean, it can be like...
I don't mean to be mean, but it comes out that way.
Yeah. You sort of just think of like... I mean, aggressive humor is actually what I think of as most stand-up comedy that we watch these
I would
days.
agree with that.
Aggressive humor is just like kind of in your face, making fun of awkward and uncomfortable, like pointing things out for the sake of getting a rise out of people because we all share discomfort, essentially.
That's a really good definition for it, actually.
Right. Affiliative humor does the opposite inside of people, where it makes them feel like they're growing bonds with the people around them because of the humor. So affiliative humor is often used in educational contexts as well. In classrooms, teachers are employing affiliative humor when they're, you know, getting everyone on the same page. If we're introducing new subjects or even new people, like especially earlier in the school year, since we're about to be right there, you can use humor as a tool to kind of grease the wheels with social,
it's
social
kind of
lubricant.
like, my understanding of affiliative humor is kind of like me meeting a new student and they're walking with a student I've already had and being like, oh, you hang out with this one, I don't know about you. Like that kind of thing. Like
That's aggressive humor, actually.
Is it? That feels more affiliative because it's more just like,
Well, it could be both,
I'm trying to feel them out.
Maybe it could be both.
Oh, this is hard.
Well, okay, so it's affiliative humor in that you're bringing that person into the fold socially, but it's aggressive humor in that you're poking fun. You're poking fun of your little troublemaker here next to you. That's aggressive humor.
Towards them. Oh, so their experience is different.
Yes,
Okay.
they have different experiences of the
okay.
same
I was thinking
instance of
blanketed.
humor.
My experience is that, but you're
Interesting.
right. That's a good point.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, and again, these are not supposed to be good humor and bad humor either.
Right.
Just to be
It's
clear.
just a difference in,
they can both be good or they could both be
the appeal
bad,
is different.
maybe. Yes, the appeal
Gotcha.
is different. And the way it's received might be different according to the person you're talking to. Whatever they're bringing to the table, it might be different. So again, in educational contexts, often we use humor to elicit laughter because laughter just helps kids be more comfortable. It can build, trust and friendship and investment in the educational process, all of these kinds of things. I'm sure you and I can remember many times when we were driven to laughter in our educational experiences because those moments stand out. You remember when you just could not stop laughing because of something some teacher said or some student said in one of your classes. But laughter can really drive learning in that way. I found this is just kind of a side note, but I found this really fun fact in this study. It was comparing college instructors to high school teachers and intermediate school teachers and the instances of humor in their classes. Now, there was a caveat about the research around this. The way that people count something as humor or not is a little mushy around the edges. So the numbers...
I was going to say that's kind of a hard thing to
The numbers
collect.
here are a little bit squishy, but at least according to some of these studies that were in this thing, these researchers found that college professors made 7.2 humorous attempts. This is per whatever, class, per semester, I guess. Per semester in a class. College professors made 7.2 humorous attempts compared to 2.8 attempts for high school teachers and 2.33 attempps for middle high school teachers. So, it's very interesting to compare the humor in a college classroom to the humor in a high school classroom.
And the thing is like, if you ask my classroom how many humorous attempts I have in a semester, they'd say 0 because they're teenagers and they would shred me. In my head, I would be like daily 5.
Yeah.
But for them, I'm not funny.
No, again.
Which makes me much funnier.
You're really hitting on something that I think actually a lot of the research has
And
struggled
middle
with.
schoolers would be even worse.
Right.
So I totally get it.
No, you're right. And that's what the researchers actually even said that. They're like, well, there's some squishiness around this because how do you count humor as humor?
Right.
That's not exactly a cut and dry thing.
And I think if I was a college professor, I mean, broadly speaking, they have chosen to go to college in a way that my students have not chosen me. Right.
Meaning like we're all in this together instead of this is our contractually obligated time together.
Right. Like I'm legally required to be at school because I'm under the age of 18.
And they're legally required to sit there.
And after that,
You're legally required to sit there.
You don't have to go to college. You have chosen to go, at least mostly chosen.
So you think the
I think the audience might be a little bit more forgiving.
well, that's interesting. But you think the voluntary nature of that educational setting makes it more ripe for humor than the compulsory nature of K-12?
I don't know if I'd say that, but I don't know.
It's a good question. It's a good question.
It is a good question, but also I can think of plenty of professors in college that if you asked me if they had a humorous anything, I would have been like, no. There's a lack of it. I've never saw any. And I'm sure that's exactly what my teenagers say about me too. So
I don't think
it's so hard because
teenagers-
it's like such a personality thing.
Teenagers were probably not the ones doing the measuring in this study, to be fair. But yes, I do take your point. I don't think the teenagers...
This is some rough data.
I don't think they were self-reporting the number of times.
Self-reporting. Hello, Miss So-and-so was hilarious today.
I think that researchers were observing the teachers in this case. But...
Okay, but also,
Yeah.
if I'm being observed, I'm not funny. Because I'm like,
yeah, I'm sure that
see, there are a lot of weaknesses of this.
cause a
I'm just kidding.
bias. No,
I think
it can cause a bias.
I think that those things roughly make sense as far as like the attempts. I mean, a lot of my humor is an attempt. I think there's a lot of things that make you... There are a lot of factors of whether or not humor lands. So there are times when you laugh at someone just because you like the person and you know they're trying, but it's not actually funny. There's like, there's like situational comedy involved. So
Well, I guess in that sense, what you're saying, producing laughter is not the same thing as practicing comedy or doing humor. Producing laughter is not.
Yeah, there are some professors that they just make me laugh.
Sure.
So like a humorous attempt is just them like
Existing.
whatever. So it's just, but that's just because of my own personality. So that's my...
Yeah.
But then I have teenagers laugh at me and like not in a fun way.
Yeah.
So there's really no in between.
They discuss some of the concerns that you bring up in the study, and I need to go read the full one now that you're talking about this because it does seem interesting. But anyway, okay, so just a little more research here about sort of typing humor. there are these other researchers. Let's see here. This one is named Hay, identified 3 functions of humor among friends, which I thought was interesting in social contexts of schools. So we've got solidarity-based humor, humor to serve psychological needs, and power-based humor.
Yeah.
So solidarity-based humor involves building solidarity among group members to create consensus. Techniques here: sharing personal experiences, highlighting similarities through shared experiences, clarifying and maintaining boundaries. So I'm sure you do a lot of this kind of thing as an educator. Humor
And with
serving
my coworkers.
Yeah, with your coworkers too, I'm sure. Yep. Humor serving psychological needs used to defend oneself or cope with problems arising in conversation.
These are teenagers.
So, well, you often, I mean, I would imagine even teachers have to often employ this kind of stuff when there's a chance that students are bordering on, crossing some professional boundary or like they're telling you too much about.
You're exactly right.
It's like, you're about to tell me something that could get everyone into a lot of trouble. So think on this before you.
That's why my first question is, do I want to know?
I am a mandated reporter. Hello.
They are also often reminded of that.
Just things to keep in mind. And then the last one, power-based humor, serves to maintain boundaries between in-group and out-group members. So this is one kids employ an awful lot in their day-to-day, teenagers especially. Just power-based humor. I would say that a majority of our humor as developing, growing, when we're students in the compulsory system, the majority of our humor growing up is probably this kind of humor because there's so much vying for social standing and so much wrestling with identity and all of this stuff that happens in for teenagers especially. So there's a lot of this kind of humor that's used to basically gatekeep different communities and niches and in-groups.
And yourself.
Yeah.
It's a protection for, I use humor as a
defense mechanism.
A safe place, yeah. Because if I can make fun of myself or if I can, then I'm going to be the one to do it. Because I'd rather do it to myself than have somebody do it about me.
Okay, and then we also talk about, some of the research about humor talks about generating social influence and credibility with humor, which is something that I definitely see teachers do in the classroom a lot. And it's partly what you're talking about. You generate a kind of influence and goodwill with your students. You build trust with them, and humor is a part of that equation. It also helps build stronger memories, and this is definitely true. I remember things that I've learned in my schooling because they were attached to some hilarious joke or something. And I only remember it because of that. There are stories that I tell over and over and over again, whether or not they remain 100% true and faithful to the original event. A little up for grabs, but what it does is it helps.
The memory's there.
Yeah. The humor helps solidify those things just kind of in this own set apart way, I guess I would say. Yeah. And then the last thing, there's also just in terms of research about this stuff, if you're interested in these things, there's also a lot of research about the way gender intersects with humor in educational contexts, the way that different people interpret even the same comment coming from people of different genders can be very, very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
We as women in the podcasting space can speak to this sort of thing uniquely. And I think a lot of women struggle with social repercussions related to these dynamics.
Can I tell you a funny story relating to that?
Yes,
The
absolutely.
gender concerns. So this was, these kids that I'm talking about are about to be seniors in college, so it's been a minute. Had them as sophomores, and their sophomore year's last period of the day, and one of the girls came up and asked me for a tampon. And I always keep tampons on my desk, right? Always do. And once they ask me, I tell them where they are so they can just come up and grab them. They don't have to ask me. Yeah. So girl, being not shy, but just like not wanting to scream it, right? Comes up, gets her tampon, whatever. She goes to leave and grabs her little purse thing and walks out. Well, she comes back and all the boys start, well, why you got your bag? Well, all of this stuff. So I jump in and I'm like, not your business, whatever she's carrying in there, just kind of making sure she knows that I'm not going to let them, whatever. Well, thank God for her. But she was just like, I was changing my tampon. What do you want to do about it? And all the boys were just like, okay. Well, you were gone a while. So they're trying to joke with her again. She's like, do you know how much time it takes to handle these things? And they're like, don't you just like stick it up there? And so she asked me in front of the whole class, can I teach them how a tampon works? And I was like, let's do this. Because where else are they going to learn it? And when I tell you that these boys had no idea what happened with a tampon. I had one of the boys grab a tampon and put it on the floor and act like they were going to shoot it from the floor up. Like they thought it was like a missile. that's how it
Like a bottle rocket?
Yes. But it was one of those moments that the humor turned back on them.
Tampon bottle rocket?
Because they were trying to make fun of her for having her period, which is the lamest joke of lame jokes. But on top of that, they looked so ridiculous because they had no idea how it worked. And then when they realized the steps that people with periods have to go through to take care of themselves, that class no longer ever was,
Weird about it.
yeah, and it was such a great flip on that humor that normally happens with like teenage boys.
Also, those boys are going to be better equipped to understand something about the people with periods in their lives more than any of the adult men that I spend time around, for sure.
And it was hilarious because later in the year, if a girl was in the restroom or something like that, they would be like, should we wait for her? She might be a while. And they never meant that she was pooping. They always meant that what if she's like taking care. Like, it was so funny. But it was one of those like comedic gold moments because they got shut down so hard. And we made it into something like worthwhile. But it was hilarious. And it was only because of the gender discrepancy in that humor. Because of course all the boys are like, huh, huh, huh. And all the girls are like, oh, that poor thing. She has her period. Like, it was great. Is that okay to on the pod? That feels okay. I teach teenagers. They got to learn this stuff somewhere.
It's up to you.
I'm fine with it. Okay. So I brought back one of our favorite things, masterclass. And I realized that as I was doing this research, I sounded like an alien trying to be funny. I was like, how to be funny in a classroom. That was basically what I was Googling. Or like the types of comedy in a classroom. Or how to use humor. So I found an article.
How to be really funny.
Right.
Ha 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 ha.
Yes. Lol.
So Rafflecopter.
I found an article from Masterclass.
Okay.
About
like their blog or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Incorporating humor.
Masterclass, we mentioned a lot on the pod, but if you're just now listening, Masterclass is this video course series taught by well-known people in various fields about a variety of subjects. And it's very interesting and expensive, but worth checking out. Yeah. So there you go. So
I just found this article from Masterclass, and it was talking about, the article title was called What Incorporating Humor Does for the Person Learning. And so this could be in any type of conversation, not just obviously a classroom, but even TED Talks, right? Like that's one of the biggest learning opportunities for some people. And so that's a flashback to last episode as well. But the article in Masterclass I knew Chelsea would have a problem with because the video that they were using for evidence was given by Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I knew Chelsea would not find that funny. Okay, so what Masterclass has to say about humor. They say that the main benefit of incorporating humor is that it can potentially help students better retain knowledge.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you talked about.
Yeah.
We remember things that stand out because of the humor associated with them.
It's certainly true for me. Do you think this is true among your students? Do you find them paying better attention and retaining things better when you're using humor?
And they remember the dumbest stuff because it was what was funny. Yeah. I'm like, really? You don't remember anything else that's on the test, but you remember, I remember little random factoids and bits of information that really kind of don't need to be in my memory because they're very easily Googleable, but I remember them because some weird, hilarious thing happened when I learned it. Thinking things about me that I've said just like passingly, and then like my kids are like, oh, well, I'm like, why? How did you remember that? You don't remember when your homework is or anything, but okay, so it helps us better retain knowledge. It releases a neurotransmitter called dopamine.
Yes.
And that activates the reward system in our brains.
The thing I am always chasing.
So when dopamine is released, your long-term memory and your goal-oriented motivations are stimulated, which means you not only have the drive to learn more, but you can hold on to it longer, which is why we remember these things even at our age.
So this is all happening because dopamine is stimulating.
And if you can't make your own, store-bought's fine.
Store-bought dopamine. All right, give it to me.
I know, approves. Okay, and so another part of it is obviously just that in the case of a classroom, this can help you have a more open environment, and it can help your classroom management if it's used wisely. And that's the careful, tricky part of it, is walking the line of knowing when and where the humor does and does not fit.
There definitely are extremes to be taken into account here. There are class clown types who will rely a little bit too much on humor, maybe as a crutch for covering up other issues, either of classroom management or other whatever, just, problems in classrooms. Humor can be. I have seen it be used as this attempt at a Band-Aid, but as with many things, moderation is still key. Yeah.
Okay, so to round out my time as an alien and searching how to be funnier.
Yeah, and Googling how to be funny in classroom. Please Google.
Masterclass listed 4 ways to bring humor into teaching.
These are the only ways. Masterclass is the only one who has figured this out.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, thank you.
Oh
okay.
my God. Don't. Okay.
Okay, so number 1, bring content to life is the first thing Masterclass says to do.
Bring content to life.
I know, it sounds so goofy, but like, there are some really fun ways to make it come alive for them.
Well, this is just stuff that you don't necessarily stop and think about as an educator because it comes naturally. So
it does.
Because we have an audience of listeners, they're not all classroom educators. You know, maybe this is a chance to be like, I remember some of this going on in my own schooling or whatever. So, you know, even though some of this stuff may sound obvious, we don't always have the opportunity to look back on our own classroom practices and be like, yeah, actually, this is working for me. Humor can do good in my classroom. So anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that's true.
We'll take it with a grain of salt that it's a little bit corny. Yeah.
Okay, so bring content to life, number 1.
Bring content to life.
Number 2, observe stand-up comics.
Oh.
This is not something I would say is for everybody, but I will say, me personally, I love watching stand-up. Like, Chelsea probably thinks I'm so weird, but I will rewatch Eliza Schlesinger's stand-up on Netflix over and over and over again. I think that... Go ahead.
I think Elijah...
There's a lot of S's in her name. I think that Eliza...
Schlesinger?
Schlesinger? I think she's really funny. But I really like to watch stand-up. And actually, we're going to talk about one of our stand-up comedians, one of our favorite stand-up comedians, after this portion of the podcast. So keep listening. But... I would also say in this kind of vein is watching things like TED Talks, right? I think watching stand-up comedians is fine, but I think watching good public speaking is important. And I think that's the point.
Yeah.
Right? It's all about tone. It's all about delivery. It's all about timing and pace and things like that.
Yeah, we made that same point in our TED Talk episode. We were talking about how it's actually more pleasant to experience good public speaking than to experience terrible public speaking. And it's true of teenagers too. They get bored with bad presenters, no matter where that presenter is. You know, it's just anyway, yeah.
The third thing from Masterclass is to avoid cruel humor, obviously.
Cruel humor is always said.
Cruel humor. And the last one is finding the balance, which is exactly what we've also talked about. You have to know where it does and doesn't fit and who it will and will not land with. I mean, if you're, something I've kind of had to teach myself as far as using humor in the classroom is knowing that if it doesn't land, it's not the kid's fault, it's mine. Or if I say something that inadvertently, and this is true with people too, it's not the person who didn't get its fault. It's mine because I think that things are funny in some way that they are not.
Yeah.
And
although, I do want to just say, as somebody who only knows your classroom from the outside, I think you also maybe should consider being just a little bit generous with yourself there and talk about it not in terms of fault necessarily, but just like knowing that with all things that you do, different things are going to work better for different learners.
Sure.
Like fault means like you've done something wrong.
Yeah, but I've had students get I don't know if upset's the word, but like I could tell the way I said something didn't hit, and so I'm not placing all the blame on me because I think that a lot of things factor into whether or not something is or is not funny. And maybe it was a bad day and another day would have been hilarious. But I have to just kind of remind myself that I'm not free of the repercussions of my statements.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. That's a good way of saying it. You always have to be aware as a classroom educator of the impact that your actions are going to have. And you're never going to know which of your kids are paying attention to which of your actions really, 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 really closely. You never know what thing you say or joke you make is going to be the one thing that kid holds on to for the rest of their life. So, that... It's something to keep in mind, just the responsibility that educators have to their students, but it is also an opportunity to connect deeply with kids too. Use responsibly, I guess, is the key there.
So if you're an alien who's come to Earth and become a teacher, I will link in the show notes
how to be humorous, how to do humor.
Okay.
How to make ha-has.
So next, we're going to talk about one of our favorite comedians.
Well, yeah.
And someone that we consider maybe one of the best media figures who uses humor as a way to educate people.
Yeah. When we were talking about this topic, I actually brought up Hannah Gadsby because she's a comedian in Australia. Well, I guess she's Tasmanian, but she's
Tasmanian.
She's a comedian known for Nanette and Douglas. Those are her two specials on Netflix. And she's also an art historian, among other things. So,
which is the best combination.
Yeah. And being the weird nerds for language that we are, we really like her specials because they tend to be meta reflections on media and language and humor and
on herself,
her sexuality, her identity. A lot is going on in these shows, but they're comedy shows that are also commentaries on comedy shows. And she talks a lot about changing her show because she was the butt of her own jokes, because it was comfortable to be the butt of her own jokes, basically. And she's given many interviews about this too, so I'm not saying anything new here, but basically she addressed this and evolved her own comedy over time to think about the ways different kinds of humor that we're talking about can have impacts, different impacts on people and on herself. She was, she's thinking about how this show that she does impacts her own sense of well-being as she gets up there every night and goes about her life and all this stuff. So anyway, very interesting comic.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really cool about what Hannah Gadsby does is she finds a way to weave in all of these things of herself that were once the butt of her jokes. She's autistic and was diagnosed as an adult, which makes her story really interesting because she talks about kind of the pathways that led her to the place of coming to, well, not only being diagnosed with autism, but living with it and kind of learning how to best use this information to help herself. She's gay, and so that's another factor of her conversations, and that was something that, I mean, I don't want to I'm not trying to speak for her, but the way that she speaks about it, it's obvious that accepting herself was hard. And so her humor is quick and witty and she's brilliant, but it's also soul crushing. It came from a place of having to learn how to love herself and kind of accepting who she is. And so when you combine those things, there were times when we were watching both Nena and Douglas that I didn't want to laugh, but her delivery and her dryness and just everything about her is just comedy. And so you're kind of grappling the whole time with oh, I'm uncomfortable, and that's her goal.
Yeah.
But what do we get from it?
Yeah, and I think the reason I wanted to talk about her and not any other comedians, we're not really talking about other comedians by name here, because we're not necessarily talking exclusively about comedy or what we, in pop culture think about as comedy. We're not talking about that per se. We're not talking about sticking a stand-up comedian's kind of humor in a classroom and seeing what works. But Hannah Gadsby in particular, among comics, has done a lot of workshopping of these ideas. She as a comic is extremely aware of using humor for social impact, I guess I would say.
And also the impact of humor on herself when it was about herself.
Yeah.
Making herself the butt of all of her jokes wasn't making her any better.
Social impact and mental health impact. Yeah.
So also she weaves in some just really great art history stuff along the way, and it is just smart comedy. It is just truly hilarious.
Absolutely. Outside of the comedy shows, she gives art docent tours as a comic. So she'll go to museums and just do walking tours in these places because she's a very knowledgeable art historian as well. So she's a very smart person, obviously. A lot of really interesting stuff to say about comedy, a lot of interesting stuff about overcoming and identity and figuring out how to find her voice amid very difficult times in some cases. So anyway, a really interesting person, worth checking out.
I think that watching Hannah Gadsby was healing in some ways. Her voice is maybe one of the most important at this time. And if she could be running the world, and if, I couldn't be a bigger fan of Hannah Gadsby, is really my story. And I just love her so much. And we've rewatched them, and they like I said, they're kind of hard to watch, but really great.
I feel like it's maybe time for a rewatch pretty soon of Nanette.
So that's Hannah Gadsby.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to just note really quickly, I linked in our last episode some of my favorite TED Talks, and a couple of the ones that I mentioned were Brene Brown and Monica Lewinsky. And as I was writing the notes for this, they stuck out to me as being really effective speakers who use humor and a great advantage of what they're saying. So if you're looking for some great examples of people who can use humor, Hannah Gadsby for sure, but both of those TED Talks by Brene Brown and Monica Lewinsky do a really nice job of it too.
Huh. Cool.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, let's just wrap up the topic then by talking a little bit about classroom experiences of humor, very boots on the ground stuff.
Yeah.
Most of this is feedback that you've had about your own classroom practices and, stuff that you've collected over the years, but some of this is also obviously more general too. But why don't you just take us through?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of already worked through a lot of this just in our discussion, but these are just a few of my favorite. I guess I broke it down to where it works and where it doesn't. There are definitely students that the easiest avenue to reach them is humor, that are not very accessible otherwise. And so I kind of have to keep that in the back of my head. Because sometimes when they're acting out or trying to be a class clown or something, I try to remind myself that maybe that's the only way that they know how to display themselves or whatever. So I try to think of that. If you know me personally, this is super old news, but if you don't know me and you haven't figured this out, I'm sarcastic in a way, like I said, it gets me in trouble. It's not a good sarcasm all the time. For the people who read it, it's great. I mean, I'm complimenting myself, but I think it's great. But all of that is to say, and it's kind of what we already discussed, just that you have to be aware of the result of humor and comedy and how you use it. And that even inadvertently, it can, separate people that you didn't mean to. And I love sarcasm in my classroom. I think it's the greatest equalizer of my classroom because early in the year when I start laying it on, I look around and I figure out who's reading me and who has no idea that I'm being sarcastic. And that helps inform me of how to treat those kids differently. And I think that's important. And this is just me personally, but I have always been someone, my parents will attest to this. Whenever I've gotten a new friend, my parents could always tell how much I like somebody by basically my rating, which was oh, they're funny.
Your humor rating?
Yeah. And so if I was talking about someone, but I never was oh, they're funny, my parents were just oh, that's just kind of a random friend in a classroom, not someone you're going to hang out with. But my parents have always been able to assess my relationships with people based on how funny I've shared that they are. And so that's just my own personal meter for people. And because I would say, obviously, my friends are some of the funniest. And
obviously.
Not you. Okay.
Excuse
You're wearing a skin
me?
suit. You don't qualify. You're not even of here. You're a stranger in a foreign land. Okay. Where it doesn't, those that don't figure it out. Okay. And especially when it's sarcasm, it's well, duh, don't you get it? And they really don't. Some people just can't read sarcasm. They don't. It's hard, but they don't. It's very infuriating for me because my sarcasm is my strongest quality. I've had parents and students say things like I was picking on someone or something like that. That's hard to hear because I consider myself welcoming and I consider myself accessible and things like that. And so it's always hard to hear that something I had said in good jest or, affects someone in a way that I didn't mean for it to. And so I do have to be careful. I've definitely pushed it too far with some humor. And that's just something that, that happens in every social interaction, all of us, I shouldn't say all of us. If you worship at the throne of Lexapro like I do, you probably spend a lot of your time thinking back on social interactions saying, oh, that wasn't funny at all. I do that in my classroom and I don't ever mean to, but sometimes it happens. And the other thing that humor can sometimes verge on is mocking. And it can be very divisive. And so it's kind of when we talked at the top about the types of humor, aggressive humor is sometimes the funniest humor, but it can also be the one that mocks or separates people or whatever. Yeah. And so you just have to be very careful. I think that's what's so tricky about humor is that it can be the best thing and it can be the most damaging thing. And you walk such a fine line when you're trying to work it in that, you're kind of always questioning was that too far?
It's a really tricky social thing to navigate because humor is the thing that ends up sort of defining your entire social network. I don't mean I don't mean in a digital way. I mean when you form tight bonds of association with friends even later in life. I'd say we do this as adults, especially we solidify our sort of groups of friends, our packs, the pack that we run with. We solidify a lot of that as we age and mature based on a shared sense of humor. I would say that almost all of the people I consider close friends right now part of the reason we are close friends is because we laugh about the
Exactly.
same things. So it can be very difficult. It's not a bad thing, but it can be difficult to think about humor and laughter and all of these things and how they intersect with social functioning, particularly for younger kids. It's just
Especially teenagers.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
my Lord.
I mean, because I can remember, like, I still remember, as much as humor can be used to build memories of things that you want to remember, it can also be used to build memories of things you don't want to remember. Because I remember people laughing at me growing up because of some bullying thing, you know? So it's just our responsibility as educators to make sure that we realize humor has to be taken seriously, I guess is the way to say it there.
Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
also, like I said, it's the best thing. But
Yeah.
it's so dangerous.
No, take it seriously doesn't mean it's not the best.
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
I
No,
agree
I
with
just
you.
mean it has real,
Yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
very powerful.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Shall we move on to fill in the blank?
Yeah.
Would you like to read last episode's question?
I will.
All right. This is the thing where this is fill in the blank. It's a little trivia segment on the show where you listeners get to write in. We ask a question every week. So if you have the answer, go ahead and write into us. We love to hear from you. Email us at hello@1621.com, all spelled out. And we would love to hear from you. So take it away.
All right, last episode. This famous educationalist gave 3 TED Talks by the time of his death in 2020, one of which has the most views of any video on TED's website. During his life, this famous educator got his start as director of the Arts in School Project, an initiative to develop arts education throughout England and Wales. Following the great success of that and other similar programs, he was knighted, published more than a dozen written works on education, and even served as a senior advisor for education and creativity at the Getty Museum in LA. Who is this famous educator? And it was Sir Ken Robinson.
Yep. Ken Robinson.
Which is the first TED Talk of the year that I show my kids.
Yeah, it's one of the very first TED Talks I remember seeing.
It's about if schools kill creativity or not. It's a really fun conversation. It's the first thing I have my kids write about. And I love it. Yeah. Okay, this episode?
This one. Okay. Theater historians credit this work as being the first comedy written in English. There's maybe a little bit of debate about that now, but traditionally speaking, it was.
We are rooted in absolute facts here.
We're very, very serious about facts.
Okay.
The play marks the emergence of English comedy from medieval morality plays, interludes, and farces. What is the name of the play? It's a weird one.
It's a weird one.
I looked it up and I was like, what even is that?
Okay.
Okay, and now we get to tell you what we have learned since the last episode. Would you like to go first?
I will.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm refusing the S word,
The S word.
the inevitable return to school.
That's school. That's school. For those of you not aware.
So we have just been really deep in a lot of media, I would say,
You're
now.
binging everything to
I
fit it
am.
in before the school year starts is what's happening right now.
We spent a few days in Louisville, Kentucky,
did.
and had a great time. Very fun city.
The Bourbon Trail.
I really enjoyed that. I got to tour the Louisville Slugger Bat Factory and things like that. So I would really recommend Louisville for anyone interested in that trip. So some things that we have taken in recently.
Yes.
We finished the season of For All Mankind.
Ah, yeah, we did.
Holy cow. Mm-hmm. We watched Lightyear, the newest Disney Pixar film.
Oh, it was so cute. I liked it a
about
lot.
Buzz Lightyear.
It made me cry.
It was really good.
All Pixar movies tend to make me cry these days.
They do that to us.
I've reached the ripe old age of mid-30s where I cry at Pixar movies.
And if you love Toy Story the way that we do, you will recognize so many great lines. So that was really fun. We watched The Captain, which is the ESPN special about Derek Jeter and his time with the New York Yankees. And it was really good storytelling. Great interviews, just really fun to watch as well. I'm currently listening to Paul Holz's book and his work on catching and finding some of the most insane criminals in those cases of our lifetime. If you listen to My Favorite Murder, my One True Love podcast, other than this one, obviously, Paul Holz is a staple there. His book is really, really good. I'm about halfway through that. What else? I think those are just kind of what I'm doing. I'm just kind of leaning into my audiobooks, and we finished The Wire, and we just started A League of Their Own, which is the story of the women who were playing baseball during the war. And the original movie is my favorite of all time. So when I say all I'm doing is binging and being sad, I mean it. So I learned nothing.
Okay.
I probably have learned a lot. I always do. You know, you just learn and you don't realize it.
I mean, you learned how bats are made at the Louisville Slugger
Oh,
Museum.
I did learn how bats are made. That was pretty cool.
So that's cool.
I learned how bourbon was made. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? I've learned a lot. So get on my level.
Okay.
I think that's everything.
Okay.
Really.
Well, so for what I learned, AI generated art. I've talked about it before.
This is cool.
Using images, artworks, stuff that people have created as data sets to train computers to produce supposed works of art. Whether or not you want to call them works of art.
They are.
Well,
is that the problem?
I don't know.
Okay.
So really all I learned was
your
that
alien brain. I see it. It's coming out.
It's coming out. No, really what I learned was that there's a very rich debate over the appropriateness of these tools, these algorithms, these machine learning applications. So I saw a tweet, really is what it was, that was arguing that one of these image generators, the way they work is you type in a sentence, you say like, I want a picture of a 5-headed dragon and being slain by a group of heroes in the style of an Art Deco poster. And it gives you this computer generated dreamscape at its best attempt at that based on what you've told it to do. So that's the way these things work. They're trained on thousands and thousands and millions of images created by real human artists. And I saw this tweet that was like, well, they're just stealing because it's just like putting all this stuff in a wood chipper and what comes out the other end is supposedly art, or people are calling it art. But is that really art, or is that really just you're just stealing everybody else's work, recombining it into something and then spitting it out the other end? Now, we talked actually about this with the coding, because remember that Copilot thing, the GitHub thing that I was telling you about? There's a coding companion for computer programmers that basically helps you generate code on the fly based on artificial intelligence applications. Anyway, same thing there. It used training data from real humans who have done real work that go into the training of these things, and people aren't compensated for that work. So basically, the argument there is like, this thing is stealing human art and it's being sold for commercial applications. Now, I looked at that tweet and I thought, I get the concern, it makes sense, but also I'm not really sure I would describe what humans do when they are producing art to be all that different from what machines do. It's just that there's the unknown, the ineffable, the mysterious human factor that is applied to it somewhere in the consciousness, where I take the thousands of images that I've learned about over the years, recombine them, and then spit them out into a work of art. The difference there is that it's just in my mind, and I can't tell you how I got the result that I got. And the training algorithm, hypothetically, you could say something about the inner workings of logic that spit out the image that you see. But even those algorithms, there's a bit of mystery as to why you get the results you get sometimes. So anyway,
that's interesting.
But what I learned is about the rich
either way.
Philosophy around these things. They're going to continue to be debates that people have in academic spheres around artificial intelligence. But I just thought that was a very fascinating thing to worry about and wonder about. And I'm not convinced I know really how to categorize some of this stuff. You know,
That's fair. I don't either. As you were talking, I was like, oh, I understand that. And then you started, I was like, I understand that.
Yeah.
Like, perspective-wise.
Yeah. The other question I had here is just like, okay, well, in the case of this AI-generated art, who is the artist? Is it the collection of other artists that produced the original artwork that trained the algorithm? Is it the algorithm itself? Is it the human being who wrote the algorithm that spit out the art? Who's the artist?
Yeah.
Maybe the answer is there is no artist.
Oh, boy.
I mean, maybe we're entering a new era of copyright where we can't enforce them because there is no such thing as a copyright owner because it was produced by a neural net. You know?
I hope my students aren't listening to this.
Okay.
I mean, their essays are going to be, just kidding. I think that approach, although it seems wild, is not far off. If that's
of
the case.
Using like an AI generated essay.
Like, I mean, I'm sure it's already happening, but I just mean
what is already happening. Half of the okay. So listeners, let me tell you what. When I see articles, when I Google something and I get an article from some random website on the internet, half of the time those things are generated by AI copywriting machines because you can tell because they read like gobbledygook. There's still a difference between a machine and a human because the machine written articles, it's just like something is not quite right here. They're bad. They're badly written. They're not fact checked. They just say things that aren't true. But on top of all of that, they just sound a little weird. They don't quite get speech. Quite.
No.
Anyway,
well, thank God. Right. What? If they could do as well as us, what would we do?
Clearly I have a lot of thoughts about this and I can't shut up about it, so I'm just rambling on. But that's what I've been learning and thinking about this week.
Okay. I'm gonna, turn
AI
back on my
generated
audiobook.
art. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Like, who is the artist? That's that. Okay, writer, like listeners who are listening to the podcast, write into us. Tell us who the artist is.
okay. Yeah. Answer that in 500 words.
And we'll talk to you in
Can I say one thing before you turn off this podcast?
Sure.
Recently shared a post on Facebook and Instagram that got a lot of traction for sharing teachers' lists for returning to the year for their classroom.
Clear the list stuff.
Clear the list. If you've seen it and you've interacted with it and I did not share your information, please feel free to email us at hello@16to1 and I will share on our Facebook and Instagram pages. I hope we were able to get some traction to get you the supplies that you need. I hope that those lists are still active because I can't imagine if it hasn't been purchased, you don't need it for some reason. So feel free to share those with us. But it was fun I got to interact with a lot of teachers and it was kind of neat to see. So I was
good
happy
to hear
to
from you
share
all.
them. But if you, have the means or whatever and you can, if you even just search hashtag clear the list on any social media network, I'm sure you will find plenty of teachers who are very deserving of supporting their classroom. Okay, I hope everyone has their hand sanitizer. I hope your allergies are not acting up.
Got your new shoes.
I'm sure my back to school sickness is like 2 weeks out from now. So, here we go. One more year.
Good luck. Let's go into the school year with a smile, with some humor.
Let's not, no. With some humor, yeah. I'm not
Some
gonna
humor.
smile.
Let's bring some humor to the new year.
We'll see you next time.
All right. See you in 2 weeks.
Goodbye.
Hey, listeners. Thanks for supporting 16 to 1.
We're trying to grow our audience, so please check us out at 16to1.com, all spelled out, and tell your friends about the show.
On our website, you can find links to follow us on social media, an archive of all our old episodes, and a contact form where you can get in touch.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show.
Over time. Nope.
Nope.
What? Where was I going with that?
Over time,
I don't.
since the creation of
The
time.
dawn of time, people have giggled.
I hope you choke on that Sprite.